Sarah Bennett stood outside Le Petit Bistro, her designer heels clicking impatiently against the sidewalk. The evening air was cool, but her face felt hot with frustration. She was running 20 minutes late for the most important meeting of her career, and her perfectly applied makeup was starting to feel heavy under the stress of the moment. "Where is this driver?" she muttered, staring at her iPhone 15 Pro Max. The screen showed the black Tesla Model S moving slowly through the downtown traffic. Sarah had specifically chosen Uber Black for this ride, expecting nothing but the best service, as usual. The restaurant's valet gave her a sympathetic look. He had watched her pace back and forth for the past 5 minutes, her Gucci handbag swinging wildly with each turn. At 42, Sarah had worked hard to build her image as a successful marketing executive. Her perfectly highlighted blonde hair, expensive clothes, and commanding presence usually got her exactly what she wanted. The autumn wind picked up, rustling the leaves on the sidewalk. Sarah pulled her designer jacket tighter around herself, checking her phone for the 100th time. The driver's profile showed a simple name, Marcus R. His rating was 4.9 stars, but Sarah rolled her eyes at the profile picture of a young black man with a friendly smile. "Great," she whispered under her breath. "Just what I need today." Her phone buzzed with messages from her assistant. "Board members are asking about you. CDO wants to start the presentation. Where are you?" Sarah's fingers flew across the screen. "Uber taking forever. Driver seems incompetent. Will be there ASAP." Finally, she spotted the sleek black Tesla turning onto her street. The car was immaculate, its black paint gleaming under the streetlights. It moved smoothly through traffic, but to Sarah, it felt like it was moving in slow motion. The Tesla pulled up to the curb, and Sarah immediately noticed how new and well-maintained it looked. Her eyes narrowed with suspicion. The driver's door opened, and out stepped a tall, well-dressed man in his mid-30s. Marcus Richardson wore a crisp white shirt, tailored black pants, and polished dress shoes. His posture was perfect, and his expression professional. "Good evening, Miss Bennett," he said warmly. "I apologize for any delay. There was some unexpected traffic on Fifth Avenue." Sarah looked him up and down, her lips pressed into a thin line. "Are you sure you're my driver?" she asked, making no effort to hide the doubt in her voice. "This seems like a very expensive car for an Uber driver." Marcus maintained his professional smile, though something flickered briefly in his eyes. "Yes, ma'am, I'm your driver for this evening. May I help you with your bag?" "I can manage," Sarah snapped, clutching her purse closer. She walked around to the passenger door, which Marcus had already opened for her. The car's interior was spotless, with soft leather seats and that unmistakable new car smell. As she settled into the back seat, Sarah couldn't help but comment, "How does someone like you end up driving such an expensive car? It's not stolen, is it?" She laughed as if she'd made a joke, but there was an edge to her voice. Marcus closed the door gently and returned to the driver's seat. Through the rearview mirror, his eyes met hers briefly. "The destination is the Wellington Building on Madison Avenue, correct?" "Yes, and please hurry. I'm already late because of the wait." Sarah pulled out her compact mirror, checking her makeup. "And don't take any unnecessary detours. I know how some drivers try to run up the fare." Marcus entered the destination into the car's navigation system, his movements calm and deliberate. The Tesla's electric motor hummed quietly as they pulled away from the curb. In the rearview mirror, Marcus could see Sarah typing furiously on her phone, probably complaining about him to someone. Little did Sarah know, this ride was about to become much more than just a trip across town. As they merged into the evening traffic, neither of them realized that the next 30 minutes would change both their lives forever. The first seeds of conflict had been planted, and soon, Sarah would learn a valuable lesson about making assumptions and the true meaning of success. The Tesla glided smoothly through the city streets, its quiet engine a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside. Sarah kept glancing at her watch, her anxiety growing with each passing minute. The digital clock on the car's dashboard showed 6:45 p.m. She was now 30 minutes late for her meeting. "Do you even know where you're going?" Sarah asked sharply, leaning forward in her seat. "I can't believe how slow we're moving. My regular drivers know all the shortcuts." Marcus adjusted the rearview mirror, maintaining his professional demeanor. "Yes, Ms. Bennett, I'm taking the fastest route considering the current traffic patterns. There's a bit of congestion on the main avenue, but I know an alternate route that should save us some time. Sarah's eyes narrowed as she watched him make an unexpected turn. Where are you going? This isn't the way. Her voice rose with each word. I take this route every day, and this is definitely not the right way. Ma'am, there's an accident on the usual route. I received an alert about it just before picking you up. This alternative path will actually save us about 8 minutes. Marcus explained calmly, his eyes focused on the road. Sarah huffed and pulled out her phone again. I'm recording this journey, just so you know. You people always try these tricks to make more money. She started typing aggressively on her phone, presumably leaving a complaint. Marcus took a slow, deep breath. Through the mirror, he could see Sarah's reflection as she continued her tirade. And where did you learn to drive anyway? Your English is surprisingly good, but you're driving. She let the sentence hang in the air, laden with implications. I was born and raised in Boston, Miss Bennett, Marcus replied evenly. I have a master's degree in business administration from Harvard, and I've been driving professionally for 7 years. Sarah laughed, a sharp, dismissive sound. Harvard, right? And I'm the Queen of England. Listen, just stick to driving and leave the jokes aside. I need to prepare for my meeting. The car stopped at a red light, and Marcus used this moment to adjust the temperature controls. Sarah had been complaining about being too hot, then too cold, every few minutes since they started the ride. If you'd like, I can show you my credentials, Marcus offered politely. They're right here in my... I don't need to see your fake diplomas, Sarah interrupted. Just focus on getting me to my destination without any more detours. And can you turn down that horrible jazz music? It's giving me a headache. Marcus quietly turned off the soft background music he had playing. The silence in the car grew thick with tension. As they turned onto a side street, Sarah spotted something that made her even more agitated. Why are there so many luxury cars with Uber stickers around here? This isn't normal. Are you part of some kind of scheme? Marcus's lips curved into a slight smile, but he remained silent. They were passing a private parking lot filled with high-end vehicles. Tesla models, Mercedes, and BMWs, all bearing rideshare service stickers. I'm going to report this whole situation, Sarah declared, pulling up the Uber app. I'll have you know I'm very well connected in this city. One call from me, and you'll never drive for Uber again. The threat hung in the air as Marcus smoothly navigated through the evening traffic. His expression remained unchanged, but there was now a glint of something different in his eyes, not anger, but something closer to amusement. They were getting closer to their destination, the Wellington Building's lights now visible in the distance. Sarah had no idea that her threats were about to backfire spectacularly, or that this ride would become a turning point in her life. As they approached the final stretch, Marcus reached into his jacket pocket, his fingers brushing against his business cards. The moment to reveal the truth was coming, and he couldn't help but wonder how Sarah would react when she discovered who he really was. The next few minutes would teach Sarah Bennett a lesson she would never forget about making assumptions and judging people based on appearances. The tension in the Tesla reached its peak as they approached the Wellington Building. Sarah's constant complaints had created an atmosphere so thick you could cut it with a knife. Just then, Marcus made another turn that Sarah didn't expect. What are you doing now? Sarah nearly shouted, her face turning red. The building was right there. Are you trying to kidnap me or something? She grabbed her phone, ready to dial 911. Marcus remained remarkably calm. Miss Bennett, the main entrance is blocked by construction. I'm taking you to the side entrance, which will actually put you closer to the elevator banks. He gestured toward the orange cones and construction barriers ahead that were clearly visible. Well, you should have told me that before making the turn, Sarah snapped. I'm going to be stuck paying extra fees because of your poor communication skills. She started recording a video with her phone, pointing it at Marcus. I want everyone to see how unprofessional this driver is being. As they pulled up to the side entrance, Sarah noticed something unusual. Several other luxury vehicles, all with rideshare stickers, were parked nearby. Each car was spotless, and all were high-end models like Mercedes, BMWs, and more Teslas. This is definitely suspicious, Sarah muttered, still recording. There's something illegal going on here. Are you all working together to scam people? Marcus pulled into a reserved parking spot marked Fleet Management. This made Sarah even more agitated. You can't park here. This is a reserved spot. Security will tow your car. She was practically jumping in her seat now. Actually, Miss Bennett, Marcus began, turning off the engine. This is my assigned spot. Your spot? Don't make me laugh, Sarah scoffed. Next thing you'll tell me is that you own the building too. Marcus reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a leather wallet. Sarah's eyes widened as she watched him through her phone's camera, still recording everything. What are you doing? Keep your hands where I can see them, Sarah demanded, her voice shaking slightly. Miss Bennett, I think it's time I properly introduce myself, Marcus said, his voice steady and professional. He pulled out a business card and handed it back to her. Sarah reluctantly took the card, her eyes growing wider as she read it. The card was made of thick, premium stock with gold lettering. Marcus C.U.S. Richardson, CEO and founder. Elite Fleet Services, LLC. Premium Rideshare Fleet Management. Sarah's phone nearly slipped from her fingers. This must be fake, she stammered, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. Not at all, Marcus replied, now turning to face her. Those luxury vehicles you were so suspicious about, they're all part of my fleet. I own and operate 50 high-end vehicles in this city, all registered with various rideshare services. That's why they're parked here. This is our company's designated area. Sarah's face turned from red to pale in seconds. The phone in her hand was still recording, capturing her own shocked expression. But you're just a driver, she managed to say weakly. Marcus smiled, but it wasn't unkind. I make it a point to drive at least once a week. It helps me stay connected to our customers and understand what our regular drivers experience. It's good business practice. He reached into his pocket again and pulled out a small folder. Inside were copies of his Harvard diploma, his business licenses, and photos of him receiving a local business leadership award. Sometimes, Ms. Bennett, people aren't exactly what we assume them to be, he said gently. Now, would you like me to escort you to your meeting? As the owner of this vehicle and 49 others, I can assure you there won't be any extra charges for the route we took. Sarah sat frozen in her seat, the reality of her behavior over the past 20 minutes crashing down on her. Her phone was still recording, documenting every second of her humiliation. Outside, several well-dressed business people walking into the building nodded respectfully at Marcus through the car windows. It was clear that he was well known and respected in this area. The tables had turned completely, and Sarah Bennett was about to learn that this was only the beginning of her humbling experience. Sarah sat in the Tesla, her hands trembling as she finally stopped the video recording. The past few minutes had felt like a dream, or more accurately, a nightmare of her own making. The business card in her hand seemed to mock her with its golden letters catching the evening light. I need a moment, she whispered, her voice having lost all its earlier arrogance. The fancy meeting she had been so worried about now seemed insignificant compared to the embarrassment burning through her. Marcus stepped out of the car and opened her door, maintaining his professional demeanor. Take your time, Ms. Bennett. Though I should mention that several of your colleagues just walked by. They might be wondering why you're sitting in the CEO's car. Sarah's head snapped up. Through the tinted windows, she could see a small group of people from her company walking past, giving curious glances toward the Tesla. Some of them were waving at Marcus. You know people from Wellington Corp? Sarah asked weakly. Marcus nodded, a slight smile playing on his lips. We provide executive transportation services to many companies in this building, including Wellington Corp. In fact, I had a meeting with your CEO last week about expanding our services. The color drained from Sarah's face even more. She had spent the entire ride insulting someone who had business connections with her company's CEO. Finally gathering her courage, Sarah stepped out of the car. Her designer heels felt unsteady beneath her, matching her shaken confidence. The cool evening air did nothing to calm her burning embarrassment. Mr. Richardson, she began, struggling to meet his eyes. I don't know what to say. Actually, there is something you should know, Marcus said, his voice serious but not unkind. That construction worker you dismissed so rudely when we turned the corner. He's one of my part-time drivers. Many of my employees work multiple jobs to support their families and pursue their dreams. just like I did when I started this company. Sarah felt sick to her stomach. Her earlier words played back in her head. You people always try these tricks, she creamed at her own prejudice. A young woman in a security uniform approached them. Good evening, Mr. Richardson. Will you be attending the business owners' meeting tomorrow? Wouldn't miss it, Jessica, Marcus replied warmly. How's business school going? Great. Thanks for the scholarship recommendation. It's making a huge difference. Sarah watched this exchange with growing discomfort. The man she had treated like a second-class citizen was not only a successful business owner, but also someone who helped others achieve their dreams. As Jessica walked away, Marcus turned back to Sarah. Miss Bennett, would you like to know how I started this company? Sarah nodded silently, clutching her purse like a shield. 5 years ago, I had one car, not even a Tesla, just a used Toyota. I drove 18 hours a day, saved every penny, and wrote my business plan during lunch breaks parked in this very spot. Marcus gestured to where they were standing. People like you would sometimes refuse to get in my car, cancel rides when they saw me, or treat me exactly how you did tonight. Sarah's eyes began to water. The makeup she had been so worried about earlier now felt heavy and fake on her face. But instead of letting it break me, Marcus continued, I let it drive me. Every insult, every prejudiced comment, every dismissive gesture, it all became bricks in the foundation of what Elite Fleet Services is today. A group of Marcus's drivers walked by, heading to their vehicles. They were a diverse group, different races, ages, and backgrounds. All of them greeted Marcus with genuine respect and warmth. Your meeting is on the 35th floor, correct? Marcus asked, switching back to his professional tone. Would you like me to escort you up? We can discuss how this evening might become a learning opportunity for both of us. Sarah looked at her phone. No more angry messages from the office. Somehow, her career-defining meeting seemed less important now. She had just received a much more valuable lesson than any business presentation could offer. The elevator doors opened before them, and Sarah Bennett stepped in, a changed woman. Her evening had started with prejudice and pride, but it was about to end with a powerful lesson in humility and respect. The elevator ride to the 35th floor felt like the longest journey of Sarah's life. Standing next to Marcus Richardson in that small space, she could feel the weight of her earlier behavior pressing down on her shoulders. The soft elevator music seemed to mock the tense atmosphere. Your company has 20 vehicles just serving this building? Sarah asked quietly, trying to make conversation as they passed the 20th floor. 25, actually, Marcus replied, checking something on his smartwatch. And we're adding 10 more next month. The demand for luxury rideshare services keeps growing. A notification sound came from Sarah's phone. Her hands shook slightly as she read the message. Meeting delayed by 30 minutes due to technical issues. She almost laughed at the irony. All her rushing and rudeness had been for nothing. Looks like you have some time, Marcus observed. Would you like to see our operations center? It's on the 33rd floor. Sarah's eyes widened. You have an office in this building too. 2 floors, actually. We monitor all our vehicles from here, coordinate with drivers, and handle customer service. Marcus pressed the button for the 33rd floor. Maybe seeing the bigger picture will help you understand something important. The elevator doors opened to reveal a modern office space. Through glass walls, Sarah could see dozens of people working at computers, monitoring large screens showing maps and vehicle locations. The atmosphere was professional but friendly, with people from various backgrounds working together seamlessly. Good evening, Mr. Richardson, called out several employees as they walked through. Sarah noticed how they smiled genuinely at him, not the fake smiles she usually got from her own employees. They stopped at a large window overlooking the city. Below them, Sarah could see the fleet of luxury vehicles, all lined up neatly in their designated spots. 5 years ago, Marcus began, I was told by someone very much like yourself that I didn't belong in a Tesla. That person canceled their ride and complained to Uber about me being suspicious. He paused, looking out at his fleet. Today, I own 50 of them. Sarah felt her face growing hot with shame. I'm so sorry, Mr. Richardson. My behavior was inexcusable. Do you see that woman over there? Marcus pointed to an elderly lady managing the dispatch center. That's Mrs. Chen. When other companies thought she was too old to work, we hired her. She's now our best dispatcher. They walked through the office, and Marcus continued pointing out different employees. That's James, former military, studying law at night. Over there is Maria, a single mom who fled domestic violence. She's now our head of customer service. And Kevin there used to be homeless. Today he manages our vehicle maintenance program. Sarah watched as these people worked efficiently, their faces showing pride in their jobs. It was a stark contrast to her own workplace, where she had often judged people based on their appearances or backgrounds. Success isn't just about making money, Ms. Bennett, Marcus said, stopping at his office door. It's about lifting others up while you climb. His office was impressive but modest, with walls covered in employee appreciation awards rather than just his own achievements. On his desk sat a small, worn-out toy car, a Tesla model. My daughter gave me this when I told her my dream of owning a fleet, he explained, picking up the toy. She was 6 then, and we were living in a one-bedroom apartment. People like you told me to be realistic about my goals. Sarah's eyes filled with tears. How you not hate people like me? She whispered. Marcus smiled gently. Hate doesn't build empires, Ms. Bennett. Understanding does. Every person who doubted me became motivation to work harder, to prove that success doesn't look like what people expect it to. A knock on the door interrupted them. Mr. Richardson, the new driver orientation is starting in 5 minutes, announced a young assistant. Thank you, Alex, Marcus replied. He turned back to Sarah. Your meeting should be starting soon. But before you go, I have a proposition for you. Sarah looked at him questioningly, wondering what this man she had so terribly misjudged might have in mind. Little did she know, this proposition would change not just her evening, but her entire perspective on life. Marcus walked back to his desk and pulled out a folder marked Community Outreach Program. Sarah watched nervously, her fingers fidgeting with her designer purse strap. Miss Bennett, your marketing expertise is well known in this building, Marcus began, opening the folder. Our company is starting a new program to help underprivileged people learn business skills and get their start in the transportation industry. Sarah blinked in surprise. This wasn't the harsh punishment she had expected. You want my help? Not exactly, Marcus replied with a slight smile. I want you to be one of our students. The room fell silent. Sarah's mouth opened and closed several times before she could speak. I don't understand. You want me, a marketing executive, to be a student? For 1 month, Marcus explained, laying out some papers on his desk. You'll work as a driver in our fleet, starting from the bottom, just like I did. You'll learn what it's like to be judged before you even say hello, to be looked down upon despite your qualifications. Sarah's face paled. But my job, my position... Oh, don't worry, Marcus continued, his voice calm but firm. I've already spoken with your CEO about our community program. In fact, she's very interested in having her executives participate in real-world empathy training. A cold feeling washed over Sarah. You spoke to Mrs. Thompson about this? Yes, just last week. She loved the idea of her executives getting a different perspective on life. Marcus handed her a document. She especially mentioned you as someone who might benefit from this experience. Sarah's hands trembled as she took the paper. It was a temporary contract for a position as a trainee driver at Elite Fleet Services. But what about my marketing responsibilities? She asked weakly. You'll do both, Marcus explained. Marketing executive by day, driver by night and weekends. Just like how I managed my MBA while driving. It's amazing how much you can learn about marketing when you're actually interacting with customers at ground level. Just then, Sarah's phone buzzed again. It was another message about her meeting. Waiting for your presentation. Where are you? Marcus noticed her anxiety. Don't worry about your meeting. I took the liberty of having my team prepare a brief explanation of why you're late. They included some information about our new corporate partnership and your participation in our community program. Mrs. Thompson is already aware. Sarah felt like she was in an alternate reality. The man she had insulted less than an hour ago was now controlling her professional fate. The contract is for 1 month, Marcus continued. You'll work regular shifts, follow all driver protocols, and most importantly, experience what it's like to be on the other side of privilege. Through the office windows, Sarah could see the busy dispatch center. She watched as drivers of all backgrounds checked in and out, each carrying themselves with dignity, despite probably facing people like her every day. Your first shift would start this weekend, Marcus said, holding out a pen. Unless, of course, you prefer I show Mrs. Thompson the video you recorded during our ride. Sarah's face burned with shame as she remembered her phone was still in her purse, containing evidence of her horrible behavior. No, please, she said quickly. I'll do it. I'll sign. As she reached for the pen, Marcus added one more thing. Oh, and you'll need to wear our standard uniform, not your usual designer clothes. We want this to be an authentic experience. Sarah nodded numbly, signing her name on the contract, the expensive pen in her hand, the one she'd often used to sign important marketing deals, now felt heavy with irony. Welcome to Elite Fleet Services, Sarah, Marcus said, extending his hand. Your orientation starts Saturday morning at 7 a.m. Don't be late. Our customers don't like to wait. As Sarah shook his hand, she realized this was more than just a punishment or a lesson. It was an opportunity to understand what it truly meant to walk in someone else's shoes. Now, Marcus said, standing up, shall we head to your meeting? I believe you have some explaining to do to Mrs. Thompson. Sarah followed him out of the office, her designer heels clicking softly on the floor, soon to be replaced by the comfortable shoes of a driver's uniform. Saturday morning arrived too quickly for Sarah's liking. The sun had barely risen when she parked her BMW in the employee section of Elite Fleet's garage. She felt strange wearing the company uniform, black pants, a white button-up shirt, and comfortable black shoes. No designer labels, no expensive jewelry, just simple, professional clothing. Good morning, Ms. Bennett, called out Jessica, the security guard from earlier that week. Mr. Richardson said you'd be joining us today. Her friendly smile made Sarah feel even more ashamed about her previous behavior. Sarah walked into the orientation room, where 5 other new drivers were already seated. She noticed their surprised looks as she entered. Clearly, they hadn't expected someone like her to be there. Welcome, everyone, Marcus said, walking into the room. He was dressed exactly like the trainees, showing no sign of being the company's CEO. Today marks the beginning of your journey with Elite Fleet Services. Sarah sat quietly in the back row, taking notes just like she used to do in college. Marcus explained safety protocols, customer service expectations, and vehicle handling procedures. It was more complex than she had imagined. Remember, Marcus emphasized, every person who steps into our cars deserves respect, regardless of how they treat you. We rise above prejudice, not sink to it. Sarah felt those words hit her like arrows. She sank lower in her seat as some of the other trainees nodded in agreement. After the classroom session, they moved to the garage for practical training. Sarah was assigned a Tesla Model 3, not the premium Model S she had ridden in before. This will be your car for the next month, explained Carlos, the head trainer. Treat it well, keep it clean, and remember, it's not about the car, it's about the service. Sarah's first task was to clean the car inside and out. As she wiped down the windows and vacuumed the seats, her manicured nails caught on the cloth. She had never cleaned a car before. She usually paid people to do this. You missed a spot, said a kind voice. It was Maria, the customer service head Marcus had mentioned. She showed Sarah how to properly clean the dashboard. Don't worry, we all started somewhere. By noon, Sarah's back ached from bending and stretching. Her first real shift would start in an hour, and she felt nowhere near ready. Nervous? Marcus asked, appearing beside her car. Terrified, Sarah admitted. What if people treat me the way I treated you? Marcus nodded thoughtfully. Then you'll understand why we're doing this. Your first passenger is waiting at the Wellington building. Interesting coincidence, isn't it? Sarah's stomach dropped. The Wellington building? But that's where your colleagues work? Yes. Mrs. Thompson thought it would be a good learning experience. Marcus handed her the car keys. Remember, same route I took with you. Construction is still ongoing at the main entrance. With shaking hands, Sarah started the car. The same smooth hum she had criticized days ago now felt comforting. She pulled up to the Wellington building's side entrance, heart pounding. Her first passenger was Tom Johnson, a junior executive she had previously ignored in office meetings. Recognition flickered across his face as she greeted him. Miss Bennett, he asked, clearly confused. What are you? Good afternoon, sir, Sarah said professionally, just as she had been trained. I'll be your driver today. Tom's surprised look turned into a small smile as he got into the car. Through the rearview mirror, Sarah could see him typing on his phone, probably sharing this unexpected sight with their colleagues. As she navigated through the city traffic, Sarah heard Tom on a phone call. "You won't believe who my driver is. Yeah, the same one who always talks about her designer bags. I know, right?" Sarah felt her face burning, but she remembered Marcus's words about rising above. She focused on driving safely and professionally, just as she had been taught. At the end of the ride, Tom gave her a 5-star rating and a generous tip. "You know," he said before leaving, "I think I like this version of you better, Ms. Bennett." As Sarah watched him walk away, she realized this was just the beginning of her month-long journey into humility. Her designer clothes were hanging unused in her closet, but for the first time in years, she felt dressed in something more valuable perspective. 3 weeks into her training program, Sarah Bennett was a different person. Her designer bags now collected dust at home while she carried a simple backpack with water, snacks, and cleaning supplies for her car. Her perfectly manicured nails were shorter and more practical, and she had learned to do her hair in a neat, professional style that required minimal maintenance during long shifts. One rainy Tuesday evening, Sarah was parked outside a popular restaurant when her phone pinged with a ride request. The name made her freeze. Linda Maxwell, her old friend from the country club who always joined her in making snide remarks about service workers. "Stay professional," Sarah whispered to herself, remembering her training. She pulled up to the restaurant's entrance, where Linda stood under an umbrella, wearing an expensive outfit Sarah would have envied a month ago. "Sarah? Sarah Bennett." Linda's voice was filled with shock. "What on earth are you doing driving an Uber?" "Good evening, Ms. Maxwell," Sarah replied professionally. "I'm with Elite Fleet Services. May I help you with your bags?" Linda stood frozen, her mouth open. This must be some kind of joke. Did you lose your job? Is this a publicity stunt? Sarah stepped out into the rain, opened an umbrella, and helped Linda into the car. As she loaded Linda's shopping bags into the trunk, she could hear her old friend making phone calls. "You won't believe this. Sarah Bennett is my driver." "Yes, that's Sarah Bennett." Linda's voice carried from the back seat. As Sarah drove, Linda peppered her with questions. "Did you have a mental breakdown? Are you being blackmailed? This isn't like you at all." Sarah caught Marcus's eye as he passed by in another company car. He gave her an encouraging nod. Over the past weeks, he had become more of a mentor than a CEO. "Actually, Linda," Sarah said calmly, "I'm learning valuable lessons about life, respect, and true success. This job has taught me more about marketing and human behavior than any executive meeting ever did." Linda scoffed. "Please, you used to make fun of drivers with me all the time. Remember that time we complained about that immigrant driver who couldn't pronounce the street names?" Sarah felt a deep shame at the memory. "That driver you're talking about? He's now a fleet manager and owns 3 cars of his own. His daughter just got accepted to Harvard." "How would you know that?" Linda asked suspiciously. "Because he's my mentor now," Sarah replied, "and that immigrant accent you mocked? He speaks 5 languages and helps new drivers learn English." The car fell silent except for the soft patter of rain. Sarah could see Linda's confused expression in the rearview mirror. "You've changed," Linda finally said, her voice smaller. "You're not the Sarah I knew." "Thank goodness for that," Sarah replied, pulling up to Linda's mansion. The old Sarah was missing out on knowing some incredible people. As Linda got out, she hesitated. I suppose you won't be attending the country club gala next week." Sarah smiled. "Actually, I will be. But I'll be driving many of the guests home safely afterward. It's amazing how different people act when they think no one important is watching." Later that night, during her break, Sarah sat in her car reviewing her driver ratings. 5 stars across the board, with comments like "most professional driver ever" and "great conversation and service." Her phone buzzed with a message from Marcus. "Saw your interaction with Ms. Maxwell. Well handled. Ready for tomorrow's challenge?" Sarah smiled. Tomorrow, she would be driving a group of marketing executives, her former peers, to a conference. A month ago, this would have mortified her. Now, she saw it as an opportunity to show them what real customer service looked like. As she prepared to start her next shift, Sarah looked at her reflection in the rearview mirror. Her face had changed. not from expensive creams or treatments, but from genuine smiles and honest work. The entitled Karen, who had stepped into Marcus's Tesla a month ago, was gone, replaced by someone who understood the value of every person's dignity. A new ride request came in. Sarah straightened her uniform, checked her appearance one last time, and started the car. She wasn't just driving people around the city anymore. She was driving herself toward a better version of who she could be. 1 month had passed, and it was Sarah's last day as a driver. She sat in Marcus's office, still wearing her Elite Fleet Services uniform for her final evaluation. The office looked different now, less intimidating, more like a place of opportunity. "So, Ms. Bennett," Marcus began, opening a folder with her performance reports, "shall we review your month with us?" Sarah sat up straight, proud of what she had accomplished. "Yes, Mr. Richardson." "Let's see. Perfect attendance, 4.97-star average rating, numerous positive comments from passengers, and," he paused, smiling, "3 complaints from particularly difficult customers that you handled professionally." "The training helped," Sarah replied, "especially after experiencing both sides, being the difficult customer and then the service provider." Marcus nodded, pulling out another document. "Your CEO, Mrs. Thompson, sent me this email yesterday. Would you like to read it?" Sarah took the paper with steady hands, unlike the trembling ones she'd had a month ago. The email read, "Dear Marcus, the change in Sarah has been remarkable. Her marketing presentations now include genuine customer insights. She's more empathetic with staff, and her team's morale has improved significantly. Whatever you did, it worked. We'd like to discuss expanding this program for other executives. Best regards, Patricia Thompson." "I didn't expect this," Sarah said softly. "There's more," Marcus said, reaching into his desk drawer. He pulled out a small box. "The drivers took up a collection to get you this." Inside the box was a silver keychain with Elite Fleet's logo and an engraving, "To Sarah, from Karen to Caring, your EFS family." Tears welled up in Sarah's eyes. "I don't deserve this." "Actually, you too," came a voice from the door. It was Mrs. Chen, the elderly dispatcher. Behind her stood James, Maria, Kevin, and many other employees Sarah had come to know and respect over the past month. "You're the first trainee who ever asked about my grandchildren," Mrs. Chen said warmly, "and the only one who brought me soup when I had a cold." James stepped forward. "And you helped me study for my law school exam during break times. Remember when you stayed late to help me fix my flat tire?" Kevin added, "The old Sarah would have just called a service." Sarah looked at all the faces she would have ignored or judged a month ago, now familiar and dear to her. These people had become more than coworkers. They were her teachers in life's most important lessons. Marcus stood up. "Sarah, I have one final proposition for you." "Another training program?" she asked nervously. "No," he laughed. "We'd like you to head our new corporate empathy training division. Your marketing experience combined with your personal transformation makes you uniquely qualified. You'll work with executives from other companies, helping them understand what you've learned." Sarah was speechless. But what about my marketing job?" "Mrs. Thompson and I have worked it out. You'll split your time between both roles. After all, what better way to market a service than to truly understand it from every angle?" The room burst into applause. Sarah stood, overwhelmed by emotion, remembering how this journey began, with her prejudice and a Tesla ride that changed everything. "There's just one condition," Marcus added with a smile. "You'll need to drive at least once a month, just like I do, to stay grounded." "I wouldn't have it any other way," Sarah replied, meaning every word. As she looked around the room at her new family, Sarah remembered her first day, full of shame and resentment. Now, those feelings were replaced with gratitude and purpose. That evening, Sarah drove her final shift in her Elite Fleet Tesla. As she pulled up to the Wellington building, where it had all begun, she saw her reflection in the rearview mirror. The perfectly coiffed hair and designer clothes were gone, replaced by something far more valuable: wisdom in her eyes and kindness in her smile. Her phone buzzed with a new message from Marcus. "Remember, true success isn't about rising above others. It's about lifting them up with you." Sarah smiled, started her car, and drove into the city night, not as a Karen, not as an entitled executive, but as someone who had learned that the real measure of a person isn't in how they treat their equals, but in how they treat those they think are beneath them. The end.